Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and a subscriber asked a question in a video I did earlier tonight that I thought I would answer. And just the gist of it, because I don't have it in front of me, but I will put it here for you guys to see. He's basically asking, if I'm so concerned with bodybuilders and their abuse of drugs being a major issue due to their own problems, why aren't I saying the same thing about professional athletes? I just kind of note it as a kind of a necessary evil in sports, rather than taking the same stance. And again, he mentions eating disorders, and that's an important point, because what I want people to understand, first of all, the actual eating disorder component of bodybuilding is just as detrimental as the drug component. That's something people need to understand. The emaciated level that these bodybuilders get for competitions is just as destructive to you as abusing the drugs. At least some of the drugs is. Obviously, some of them can kill you really, really fast, but that's just a couple of different ones, not the majority of the ones they're using. So that's actually equally detrimental. But what people need to understand is that when we're talking about professional athletes versus bodybuilders, there is a dose-dependent difference. And what I mean is the doses they use compared to each other is absolutely enormous. And let's also consider the professional athletes are oftentimes making millions of dollars from what they're doing. These bodybuilders are not. They're destroying their health for almost nothing. Sometimes they're paying more money to bodybuild than they actually make off of it. Sometimes thousands and thousands of dollars more than they're actually getting, whereas an athlete might be earning $1 million or more a year. Now, the thing that you've got to consider there is, again, what are they doing to their body's difference? Well, I showed you guys Jerry Ward's stack that he sent to me, and you guys see where he's at in bodybuilding. He was using 2 grams of gear plus growth hormone plus IGF-1. You guys have seen Boston Lloyd's admitted stack, yeah? You guys have seen Rich Piana's admitted stacks. All right, let me tell you guys kind of what athletes use. I've known a number of endurance athletes, triathletes, marathon runners, and I'll tell you guys roughly what they use. And think about what Lance Armstrong used. Lance Armstrong wasn't big. He used testosterone and growth hormone. Same stuff bodybuilders use to get massive, right? Why wasn't he big? Particularly when we know from studies that you can get big off of drugs without even lifting weights. Proven fact. Not even subject to debate. We have hard data confirming it. There's a dose-dependent response. The more you take, the faster you grow, irrespective of whether you train or not. And we've even seen that people who train and use a moderate amount will grow slower than people who use a much larger amount and stop training completely. The guys who are already lifting will go on drugs and studies and gain more muscle if they just use enough than the guys who continue to train on less. So we're dealing with a dose-dependent response. Well, Lance Armstrong just didn't use enough to get massive. But a lot of you, so you guys remember the doses there. Jerry Ward, even with his size, 2 grams plus growth hormone, like something like 6 units or something. IGF-1, other stuff. A lot of endurance athletes I've known who use the exact same things. Around 200 milligrams of testosterone a week is really normal, and they use like 1 unit of growth hormone a day. That is literally 10% of what like Jerry was using. 10% or less if you count the other peptides and growth hormone and everything else. So 10% of what he's using. 3 or 4% of what Rich Piana uses. That's what they're using here. You have to understand, just like anything that you put into your body, the level of risk, the level of toxicity is dose dependent. Meaning, if you increase the dose on anything you take tenfold, you are dramatically increasing the risk of having health issues from it, just like alcohol. It's one thing. There's a moderate, maybe small risk associated with drinking 2 shots of vodka every single day. 20 shots of vodka is going to have a higher risk. 40 shots of vodka every day is going to have an even higher risk. Same thing with a cigarette. If you smoke a cigarette, 1 cigarette every day, there's a very modest health risk there. If you smoke 10 a day or 20 a day, the risk goes up in proportion. There's a dose-dependent risk also. What you need to consider is that a lot of these athletes are using just small amounts for a massive boost in recovery and endurance. And that little bit that they're taking, if you look at bodybuilder doses, you're like, well, that couldn't be doing hardly anything. Well, no, that could move you up 20 spots in your sport. That could take you from 25th place to 5th place. It's enormous. Absolutely enormous in terms of recovery, improved stamina, endurance, work capacity, everything. Even better joint health, connective tissue. They glean a lot of benefits from that. So when you're trying to compare the two in terms of risk, yes, it's still extreme. It's still risky, but to try to compare what most professional athletes out there might be using, or even top-level athletes at the amateur level versus what bodybuilders are doing is you're comparing apples to oranges. You're literally comparing someone who takes a shot of vodka every day versus someone who takes 10 or 20 shots every day. There is a different level of risk associated with it. And I'm not saying it's risk-free because it isn't, but it's dramatically different. Then you combine the extreme dieting and the starvation and the dehydration, and on top of it, that's what we're talking about. And the difference is athletes are fulfilled in what they do. A lot of the physique competitors aren't. They're not doing something they enjoy. They're doing something they feel they have to do due to a psychosis and a body image disorder. And even when they win, they're still unhappy with themselves. They don't even get to enjoy oftentimes the fruits of their labor and the fruits of their risks that they've taken to their health. Sometimes they're still miserable, and when they look in the mirror, they see a tiny, weak, fat person. That's the problem. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.